Left Behind, the only single-player DLC for The Last of Us, is both familiar and new, and entirely bittersweet. It answers questions pertaining to the character Riley, who was only mentioned in The Last of Us, but obviously had a profound effect on Ellie's take on life. It also answers questions pertaining to the gameplay. How would Naughty Dog handle combat if this is a prologue before Ellie used a gun? Would we control Riley instead? Thankfully, they handled it in a creative and clever way, having Left Behind trade off between two different time periods that share a familiar setting. It opens with a flashback to a midpoint of The Last of Us, with Joel being seriously wounded at the university. In the main game, there is a huge gap between this event and us taking control of Ellie as she searches for food later on in winter. It's in this gap that she finds refuge in a mall and begins to search for supplies to stitch up Joel's wound. It's a slow start, no enemies to fight, no crafting items to scavenge, instead you only explore. The familiar tropes return, puzzles tied to progression and notes left behind, no pun intended, that tell the melancholy tales of the mall's previous inhabitants. Each chapter switches between the present and the past. The past is mostly a somber and lighthearted tale of Riley and Ellie. Riley left Ellie a while ago, and returns out of the blue to have a little fun with her, dropping the fact midway through their adventure that the Fireflies are taking her away from Boston, and therefore from Ellie. It's very bittersweet playing these sections, as you know what fate awaits both of them. These segments are primarily storytelling, with Ellie and Riley exploring an abandoned mall. They ride a merry-go-round, take photos together, imagine playing an arcade game, and also have a water gun fight at the end. These little stories open up minigames, and choice-based gameplay not seen before. You can decide whether or not to take a swig of alcohol, and you can repeatedly interact with an 8-ball fortune-telling skeleton head. Ellie's infamous love of puns also returns, with a multitude of bad jokes you can choose to share.
Alright. I heard 2 peanuts walked into a park. One was assaulted.
Oh!
Good one.
That was a good one.
When taking photos together, you can choose lovers, friends, or cool, and then proceed to choose what face to make at the camera. The arcade game becomes an actual fighting game, though you only see button prompts and the health of the two characters. It's a nice aside that requires complex combinations of button presses before time runs out and your character gets hit. It all culminates in Ellie regaining her precious water guns and fighting Riley in the familiar gameplay system of hide and seek, except without bandits or infected. However, the fun can only last so long, and soon infected show up and start chasing you throughout the mall as you make your escape. The plot of these sections are thick, with references to Ellie's past including her mother, the Queen Firefly Marlene, her lack of friends, and her complicated past with Riley. It's clear that the two care about each other, though it's hard to make out whether this is just as friends or something more. After the water gun fight, Riley takes Ellie's Walkman and hooks it up to the stereo system of the department store. They get up and start dancing, both knowing that this could be the last time they'll see each other. Ellie stops and just looks at Riley, and nearly crying, tells her not to go.
What's wrong?
Don't go.
She then kisses Riley and apologizes shortly after, but Riley just brushes it aside. It seems as if the two are going to run away and carve their own path, like Gone Home Sam and Lonnie. We know the heartbreaking truth, though. In their flight from the infected, both are bitten and contemplate their options. Riley gives a speech about fighting no matter what, for every moment they get together. This speech overlaps with Ellie patching up Joel in the present, and closes out Left Behind. Your past with Riley are much happier times compared to the sections you control Ellie in the present, who must overcome the potential death that awaits her around every corner. Infected do eventually show up, and are still a pain to fight. Thankfully, infected fights quickly become intermixed with human interactions where you could very easily lure clickers and runners to the hiding spots of bandits. This makes the encounters much easier, as those who survive are easy pickings. The climax of present Ellie's section is an extended fight, mainly with bandits, with infected only showing up late in the battle. It was the only time I was happy to see clickers show up at a fight. I was worried that the bow wouldn't show up since it was a favorite of mine in the main game, and thankfully Ellie does acquire one in time for taking on bandits. However, the lack of upgrades is a bit disappointing. You also acquire a hunting rifle, though depending on how you handle the final battle, you might never actually be able to use it. Ellie also spends a majority of her time exploring and solving small puzzles tied to moving forward. At first it's finding a key to a door, and then siphoning gas into a portable generator, which was the only point I got stuck in. The light platforming done on air ducts is tense, since the generator you recently restarted has now turned the cold water below into a conductor of death for any who touch it. Overall, Left Behind is an amazing piece of storytelling. The bittersweet tale of Riley and Ellie, intermixed with Ellie fighting to save Joel, is a touching story to see side by side. The setting of both past and present, a mall, also ties the two together, and adds to the desperate need to not lose someone else Ellie cares about. The gameplay with Infected is still less desirable compared to Bandits, but the way you can lure Infected to human enemies is something I wish we had seen in the main game. The story is the main draw here, and something any fan of The Last of Us, and especially of the character Ellie, should experience. I would give Left Behind a 9.5 out of 10.
I think it's clear.